All right, we're going to get started here. I'm sorry we got a little bit of a late start, but technical and issues a little bit. My name is Gregg Kimball, and I work for the Library of Virginia, which is the state archives in Richmond. And one of the things I'm really interested in and gotten a chance to work with some of the people that are up here is traditional music in Virginia and the development of it. And so that's, I guess, my job here is just to talk. I want this to be a conversation. I don't want, so, and feel free to, as Linda Richmond says, talk amongst yourselves. So probably the first thing we should do is go down the line and have people introduce themselves and say a little bit about the music that they play. So, David?
I'm David Cole, and I'm actually born in Washington, D.C., so I've listened to all the music in the area, and my parents played all the old jazz music. I grew up in the 60s listening to all the R&B and everything on the radio, but my brother went away to college. He came back with some blues records, and that's when I first started hearing Howlin' Wolf and Jimmy Witherspoon and people like that. And then playing the guitar, I just said, well, let me try to do some of this stuff, and I enjoyed it. And I couldn't find my voice as a kid until I learned how to speak the blues on the guitar. One night I was playing in this little strip club in D.C. Y'all ever heard of the Macombo Lounge? Some people might know the Macombo Lounge. And I just found my voice in there that night, and then I knew, I had a friend who used to hit my leg every time it was time to change, and I finally found it. So, I've been listening to all the music that you ever want to hear all my life, and blues is just, to me, just like the root of the soul feeling. All these other music have beautiful beats and beautiful lyrics, but the emotional part, the soul of the music, I think blues is the heart of it all. And you hear it in everything that flowered out of that tradition in this country. That's all I want to say right now.
Great. Thanks, David.
I'm Sevier. I started singing blues about 4 years ago in Belgrade, Serbia. My family had moved there, and I was having a really tough time finding my place. And I couldn't connect in school, and the one thing about Serbia is that they have a great nightlife. Every other club has live music. So I was invited out to see some blues musicians, and we're sitting in this bar that's 4 by 11 square meters. It's really smoky. And they're like, oh, you're American. You don't have an accent. Come sing with us. And I was like, I don't know. I hadn't heard blues before then. So the first song I sang with them was Mustang Sally, and a guy whispering the lyrics into my ear. I'd never heard it before. So
how Jimmy Reed sang.
Yeah.
So I whispered the lyrics in his ear.
So Mustang Sally, Stormy Monday, and Hoochie Coochie Man were my first introduction to the blues. And I started going and playing with these Serbian blues musicians at about 11 o'clock at night till about 1 o'clock in the morning. And found my place.
I think one of the great things about this panel is it is very diverse in many ways, and particularly one in terms of age. We have obviously some very experienced musicians who've played for a long, long time, and then some younger people, and it's great.
So do you sing with a Serbian accent?
Sometimes, but I really want to. Throw in a couple words.
And you have your friend Devin with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, say a little bit about who you are, Devin.
My name is Devin Divecha. I was born in Falls Church. I've lived here my entire life. And my dad basically raised me on the blues, just having, always listening to him since before I can even remember. And he also just had instruments all over the house, guitar, drum set, a piano. So I kind of, figured out, I either took lessons or I taught myself to play them. So I've been playing music almost all my life.
And Devin and I played together in Falls Church, and so it was great. I moved here for senior year, and I was really bummed to leave. And met him in the band room, and he was playing blues, and I was like, no way.
I was sitting in the hallway, and she runs up to me. She's like, do you know any Johnny Cash? She's like, oh, okay, boom, 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 boom. So.
It's one thing that's really struck me going to not just blues festivals, but old-time music there's this whole new injection of younger people getting turned on to roots music, and it's really exciting to see. Nate, tell us a little bit about your story.
And, I'm Nate Foley, and I characterize my guitar playing as soul, but the way I started off was like my first introduction to blues was Hendrix, really. And then, Hendrix listened to like Albert King and Buddy Guy and all those guys. So I got into that afterwards. So that was basically my blues introduction. But then, like, my thing with blues is that, it comes out of also a lot of other areas of American experience. And I've spent a lot of time playing in gospel churches. And that adds a whole nother degree of, like, addressing these problems. So I've, like, put together my like gospel church experience with Hendrixy bluesness, and so
What do they think about that?
it's a fun thing to play in front of people because the blues is really the foundation of all these American kinds of music, even punk and even like American psychedelia and stuff like that. It's all rooted in blues. So it's really interesting to take the things from the roots of blues and then just expand on them so you can't even like, it's hard to tell sometimes that it's coming from blues, but it's definitely the foundation of everything I play, and it's where it all comes from.
Cool. So what church can I go to hear you play?
Well, Sharon Bible Fellowship Church in Atlanta, Maryland.
Say it one more time.
Sharon Bible Fellowship
Sharon
Church.
Bible.
Yeah.
So,
But right now I'm actually living in Nashville.
Oh,
And
really?
Nashville has a really, really nice country blues scene.
Wow.
So, I mean, getting to be in Nashville and to see they really address the blues really well since they're mixing it in with country, and that's really guitar-y. So they're just like throwing guitar in your face. And it's
So
great.
I'm hearing a real expansive definition of the blues, which I like.
Yeah,
I remember a couple years ago. I know a couple. In fact, I think Rick and Phil were both here for that panel discussion. Warner Williams talked about Hank Williams as one of his inspirations, and somebody he felt was really a deep blues guy, and that
Well, John Jackson had the same kind of thing going.
absolutely. Yeah, John would play an Ernest Tubb song, and
Anything
some
that
banjo.
they liked.
Yeah.
I remember one time John was playing a concert up at a high school in Warrenton, and there were some of his students, and it was like he was playing old string band music. It was like, and it was just about, he did his own first set, and then he came up and some of these fiddle player and string band, and they were jamming for a while.
Did he play guitar with that?
Oh, he was playing guitar. I don't think he played banjo, but it was like old time string band.
He knows more than we know.
John knew, yeah.
So let's come back. That's a really interesting theme. So let's come back to that. But I want to finish hearing from everybody here. So Matt, tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
I'm Matt Wigler. I'm a piano player and a singer, and I'm from Maryland. And I got introduced to blues. I was about 8 years old, and I had already been playing just some basic piano. And I had a great teacher that introduced me to the music, and I fell in love with it. And so I started playing more and more, and I started doing, going out and playing with some bands. I started playing with Deanna Bogart. She was my teacher when I was 11, 12, 13 years old. So she was a great influence and started taking me out with her band, and then sort of introduced me to some other styles of music, and I started playing more and more jazz as well as blues. And the last year I've been studying at the Manhattan School of Music in New York City, and doing a jazz program. And so I'm sort of open to a lot of stuff and playing in blues bands, jazz bands, rock bands. So it's fun to play. So I'm trying to do a lot of different things.
Good, great. John, when Lou was talking, it made me think of you. You can testify to the international dimension of the blues.
Well, I've played in Beograd a few times.
Where did you play?
Oh, I played at the university twice,
Okay.
and I played a concert there probably
In the arena?
1980 something. Yes.
Wow.
And so there's a big blues scene. Exactly what you said is true.
Did you ever go to Vox?
No, I've got to think back. I've played all through the former Yugoslavia, and but I'd have to focus back on all the joints I've played at.
Okay.
I had some great experiences there.
And we need to speak up a little, because this is being recorded, which is great to document this. And particularly with the Virginia Foundation for Humanities, our sponsor, they of course like to have this information for our scholars in the future to listen to. So speak up if you can. So the wind's a little blowing through here. Well, John, tell us a little bit about when you first started playing this music.
Well, my first inspiration came when I was 7, 1949. My father brought me to hear Big Bill Knieser at a concert he played in a church in New York. And I was so impressed with Big Bill, and I was introduced to him after the show, and I don't know, something clicked in my brain, I guess. I don't know. By the time I was about 10, I started buying blues records. At that time, in the early 50s, in New York, there were artists like Josh White, Leadbelly came through town, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. So there was a folk blues kind of thing that was happening, and I became a real fan of the music, started buying records. Then there was the Alan Freed rock and roll shows. These were the great, unbelievable 20 artists. For $2.50 you could get to see Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and Jackie Wilson and all these groups, the Cadillacs, the Eldorados, the Drifters, the Coasters. It was just phenomenal. And Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry just turned me on so incredibly. I went out and bought their records and started to learn their songs. And this is before I played an instrument. In 1960 I bought a guitar and I started playing professionally in 62. It sort of came on very fast. I knew all the songs. I also, in that period between 55 and 60, I got turned on to Robert Johnson and Son House and Blind Boy Fuller and Blind Willie McTell, a lot of the Piedmont artists, and so I don't know, it was like so much information all at once, and all this feeling of wanting to do it myself and play, and everybody said, "You're nuts, you're out of your mind, this isn't ear music," and I said, "Yes, it is." And I went out and made it mine, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Well, I know Rick has certainly been influenced by Piedmont blues in this area, of course, in Virginia. One of a native style here. So tell us, Rick, a little bit how you got into playing the music and your background.
I'm a military brat. I was born in Fort Belvoir, and up until my sophomore year in high school, we moved every few years, so we lived all over the place, including England for a number of years. And there was always music in my house too. My father was a big Ray Charles fan, and my mother was a Johnny Mathis fan. And we grew up listening to Sing Along with Mitch. So I learned a lot of songs. I knew a lot of lyrics and would sing a lot of songs based on that combination of artists that we listened to. And being in the military, I think my father had access to pretty good recording equipment, playback equipment. So we always had like a fairly good stereo system, and living in England, listening to the BBC radio shows where and Elvis was taking off and things like that. And when I got back to the U.S. and in my sophomore year of high school, I kind of like discovered Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton. My first really influences in the blues was the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. I had not heard of Muddy Waters. I had not heard of all those other guys. I did not know where their roots came from. But I thought, Elton Bishop was a hell of a guitarist, and Mike Bloomfield, definitely. And Paul Butterfield played a mean harmonica as far as I knew. And then
I started understanding where they got their roots from. And so that was the Chicago style of blues. And it wasn't until the first time I went to the Washington Folk Festival here in Glen Echo, which a lot of us have performed, that I ran into John Jackson and Archie and John Cephas. And I didn't think too much of it. I mean, I like John Jackson a lot. And I really didn't realize how much influence he had in the blues community until one day I was in the Arlington County Library and I was going through the blues books. And here's a picture of John Jackson in one of those books. And I'm going, holy, whoa! And like I had been over to his house like the week before because he just lived literally a stone's throw from here at Fairfax Station. And then from there, I just started, anytime they were in town or anytime we were around, just soaking in everything that they were doing. All three of those guys. They were all generous and showing things. They didn't turn their backs to you while they were playing, like some guys are reportedly known to do. And so that's what happened. And this is the result of it.
There he is.
And I'm sure most of you know that this festival is to some degree a tribute to John, who did live here from Rappahannock County originally, but did live here in Falls Church area, and was just, for me too, someone who I learned a lot of early blues guitars from. So, and yeah, it's a good segue to Eleanor because she did a really nice documentary called Blues House Party that was actually filmed at John's house.
At John's house, yeah. Yep. We're going to show it at 3 this afternoon somewhere. It's probably in the program.
I have it on VHS.
Well, it's now on DVD.
Actually, it's on YouTube.
Yeah, but it's streaming on YouTube. You just watch it. Folk Streams. That is a great site, by the way, you all. Folk Streams is great. You can watch almost anything.
Well, I was just going to say, some of us grew up in the day when you had to click 78s to hear some of this music.
Yep.
And unfortunately, some of people like me still have that addiction. But and there was maybe 2 or 3 major reissues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Compilations.
It's hard to find.
And
stuff.
now you have the internet. It's just an amazing thing.
Yeah. Thank heavens for the internet. Last night at the concert, John mentioned WLAC. And I used to listen to that too. And I think a lot of people did, all over the country. Yeah. Somebody should do a book about it.
It was a clear channel,
yes.
So after dark, you could get it on the moon, probably.
Yeah. I used to be going to sleep and listen to it, secretly.
Big Hugh Babe and John R.
And I love on Sunday nights for the gospel, Walk That Milky White Way was the theme song. It was so beautiful.
Dixie Hummingbirds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now you can find them on YouTube. But anyway, so I really loved the music. I didn't have a clue what was going on. I didn't know anybody who played anything because I grew up in a little town in Louisiana. So at one of my birthdays, I got my parents to get me a guitar, but I didn't know what to do with it. So I would sit on the bed holding the guitar and listening to WLAC, and that was it. And they gave me lessons, but it wasn't anything I wanted because it was like scales, and I didn't want scales. But anyway, when I went away to school, when I went to college, that was in New Orleans, I started meeting people who played, and my whole life it's been meeting people who played. Because that's it, I don't really do tab or anything. I can kind of fake it, but we'd go down, we go down to the quarter and go to these places. And if I saw somebody down there with a guitar, I would follow them, and I would say, I'd stalk them, and I'd say, hi, and then eventually I'd say, well, how do you do that? And I've been doing that ever since. And I have to say, though, when I came up here, I started singing out, but it wasn't just blues, because who was talking about finding their voice? That's what you kind of have to do. I mean, I was singing a lot of different stuff, but occasionally something kind of bluesy. But I sort of grew into it, and I think because I was playing, you know, bluegrass in an upright bass and blah 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 blah. But anyway, when I came up here, I think when I started meeting people like John Jackson and Archie, and especially Flora Moulton, who did spiritual and truth music, but she was, you know, I mean, her slide guitar, her delivery, everything about it kind of melded into blues. She used to say it's just that was just blues with a different tune, or vice versa. So anyway, the people around here that I really met, I think that's how I got into this more exclusively, and so that's my story.
And Bill, you played with Flora as well.
Yeah, I did. I guess really playing with her, I consider to be like some of my first real serious playing. I was lucky to get hired to play with her at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. So we did that for several years when I was in high school, and that's how that was some of my first like real playing experience. And she was an amazing woman. She was blind, and she like Eleanor said, she played slide guitar. She would sit on what's I always confuse the street corner.
I think 11th and F.
11th and F,
right
yeah.
by Woody's display window with all these fancy clothes and stuff.
H&M, whatever that store is
Yeah.
now.
I have no idea.
I think it's H&M.
So, but anyway, she would sit there and she would play, and she had a tambourine, like her foot jammed in a tambourine.
It was her foot was the exact size of the tambourine, but you had to pull it off.
And like Eleanor said, she did gospel songs and what she called truth songs, and the truth songs were songs that she wrote herself. She was an amazing songwriter, and there were songs about how to navigate through life, you know, how to, you know, and so she was, so yeah, I had that, and I guess the thing about that I'm most grateful for her is that she was very, you know, sitting on the street corner and playing. She was used to like stopping in the middle of a verse to say thank you, or, you know, so the only clue I had where she was going to go in order to be able to play, you know, together with her was to try to follow her voice, and it taught me to be to listen carefully and also to read minds. So, so be careful what you do. But anyway, so when I was in high school, I had a really terrible electric blues band and the name of the band was so terrible that I will never say it out loud. And if you ever find out what it was, will swear your line. Anyway, but that band, I was playing at Tavern Square in Alexandria, Virginia, and there was this little guy. I think his name was Philip Roberts. He had an art studio. He refurbished old paintings, and they called him the Mayor of Cameron Street. And for some reason, he loved my band that I had in high school, and so he hired us to play this concert series at Tavern Square. And John Jackson and his wife showed up, and I got to meet them, and I was blown away. I was like, you know, because he played before my band, and he heard us, and in spite of that, he invited me to come and play with him the next weekend at Tavern Square. And I thought, you know, he's just being nice. He doesn't really mean it. He couldn't possibly mean it. And so I didn't show up. And the next time he saw me, he was pissed off that I didn't show up. You know? And then I realized that he really meant it. And I mean, he was a man who had traveled all over Asia. Had, you know, as he said, he was in the book, you know, Blues Who book. But he was like, you know, come to my house, hang out. I used to go. You know, just sit in his living room and play with him, and I've got to be good friends with his sons. I used to go play baseball with them, and Cora, his wife, she, you know, one thing about her, I mean, you know, this Piedmont music that a lot of us deal with is dance music, but no one really dances to it anymore. Kids. And there's a few people, you know, John D. Holman is a dancer. Aljamain Hinton, she's a dancer. Cora used to teach the young girls in the community dancing. And the young girls in that community, they would go to Cora instead of going to Girl Scouts and whatnot. You know, she was like an institution. And they were wonderful and just amazingly generous with their time and talent. And because of that, I mean, the seeds of John Jackson's plan are everywhere.
And how did you meet John Cephas and start playing with him?
I met John Cephas at the Smithsonian Festival. I was there playing with Flora, and John showed up. He was in a group with piano player Big Chief Ellis, who was the band leader, and it was just the three of them, John and Chief, and they had a bass player, James Bellamy, and so we were hanging out. Johnny Shines I had gotten to know from like very early on, and so I was hanging with him, and he introduced me to John and all these other people. Sonny Lanston was there, Sonny Rhodes, a bunch of other people, and we were wandering around the festival, and somebody had left a sound system on, and we got into a jam session, and Johnny Shines, he said, because I'd been talking to him about, I'm really enjoying, playing this gospel music, but really what I want to play is blues. He said, well, just bide your time, you'll get your chance, And he introduced me to Cephas and Chief and all those. And so at this jam, he came up to me. He said, "Okay, I want you to go up there, and I'm going to sing a phrase in your ear, and then you play it right after I sing it." Okay. and that's what he did. But then so I got to know all them, and we wound up jamming at the Child Hair a little later on that night. And then Chief and John asked me to join that band. And the funny thing, just one quick thing about Chief Ellis, and then I'll shut up, is we had a gig to play for Jimmy Carter's inauguration at the train station. And my mother was in town, and I told her to come down there. So she came in while we were, sound checking and all, and she looked up and she saw Chief. She said, "Wilbur, what are you doing here?" and it turned out that Chief Ellis was from the same little town that my family was from, where I spent a lot of my summers growing up, and he was a classmate of my father. My father passed when I was 7, so in my life I have not met very many people that actually knew him. And Chief was his good friend and classmate when they were growing up. And so I thought, I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
Wow. All right. We're just going around and introducing ourselves and giving some sense of our music and how we got into playing. So.
Cool. I'm Christylez speaking. I do what I like to call progressive hip-hop music, which is taking traditional elements in hip-hop, such as beatboxing, which is all percussion with the mouth, emulating the drum set like that. I take traditional elements in hip-hop, like beatboxing and rhyming, storytelling, and mix it with different genres of music from all around the world. And so I had the pleasure of collaborating with Sir Rick Franklin over here, and we've mixed together Piedmont blues and hip-hop and go-go. Being a Southeast DC native, I grew up listening to both hip-hop, which is a New York type of invention, and go-go, which is strict DC thing right there. And so both of them play a big role and an influence on my own music. And hip-hop being a genre that is based on collaging together audio samples from different things to create music. If you don't have the means to afford an instrument, it's only right that that collaboration happens inside of hip-hop, but just on an instrumentalist perspective, like with acoustic musicians. And so being a lover of go-go music, I listen to Piedmont style, and I'm like, I hear the swing in it, I hear the funk in it, it resonates with me, and I like that style. And then I also hear the traditional jazz elements in there, and then with go-go has that swing, go-go has that call and response, and I just find both of those connecting. And hip-hop music, hip-hop music is also dance music. and we have a bit of swing in that style too. And so I'm very much so interested in mixing them together. We've been working on this for like some time now. You know, we've done collaborations on many different occasions and stuff like that. And I'm still trying to learn a little finger picking pattern, but yeah. So it's been great. That's what I'm working on.
Awesome. Have you listened to early John Lee Hooker?
Say again.
Have you ever listened to really early, I'm thinking in the 40s, I think John Hammond knows what I'm talking about, early John Lee Hooker, some of his like Boogie Children, some of those tunes, which are sort of like, I mean, the original and some of the stuff where he's just by himself or maybe one other person before he started playing regularly with band on record at least. And some of that stuff is pretty extemporized, almost spoken.
See, I haven't heard this yet, but I will be writing this down so you can talk. I love this. Like what I do is like ethnomusicology curated through hip hop. You know, so I'm very much so interested in this. So all the great recommendations that you have for me to listen to, I'm definitely taking them down and putting them on the queue. You know, and just listening to those bad boys. I don't have the means to listen to a 78. But you know,
I can hook you up.
He did at you. When you said 78, I was like, yo, what's your 78? And then I had to go to my new school tools. I spent Wikipedia that one. I'm like, oh, that's the vinyl.
It's shellac, actually.
We should have mentioned cylinder.
Cylinder recordings. It looks like getting too technical here.
That's like the Ellis stuff, right? Yeah. I've actually seen those. See, I'm familiar with a cylinder more than the 78. That's crazy.
Yeah, me too. The wax.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm hearing is, you know, this idea of synthesizing music, and one of the things that drives me nuts is when on the few times I've been like judging a blues contest, you know, and what's the obvious argument? What is blues? You know, people get up and play all kinds of different styles, and we get all hung up about what blues is, and you know, it seems like there's this. We try to reify it into one thing, but I want to go back to the Piedmont style. Talk a little. The people, I know several of you play that style. Talk about all the different things that's in Piedmont that we don't even maybe think about or hear, right? I mean, there's all these earlier musics that flowed into it. Ragtime, all kinds of other things. So it was a synthetic music itself, right?
Yes. Yeah,
talk a little bit about that.
Well, you put me on the spot. We'll take it by artists, like Fuller or. Well, actually, all of it basically. Blues basically is a story. You're telling a story, and the Piedmont artists just happen to, and that's loose. You know, we first of all, right now in this day and age, a lot of people don't consider the finger style blues as Piedmont style. It's now finger picking. Basically, you got a thumb action that's going on, and you've got your 3 fingers, sometimes 2 fingers going on. Sometimes even like Reverend Gary Davis, right? He was like this, and as a means of setting down a rhythm for you, setting down melody lines for you, so you can tell a story. Like in Flora's style, she used a lot of slide, but she was still telling a story, and a lot of the stories dealing with a life lesson that we're all dealing with on a regular basis. And so the Piedmont style, it'll take folk songs that were popular from the area, if there was Irish community or German community or Italians in the area, you know, some of the instrumentation that was used was also incorporated in that. Mandolin, harmonica, whatever instrument was available. If you had a piece of wire, you could nail it to the side of the house and make yourself a diddly bow and slide and make music, but you're telling a story. And so Piedmont style is just a way of putting together the package to tell a story about a situation. Okay? Leaves on the tree. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, for people that aren't guitar players, when we talk about you got your thumb working, that's the bass. You know, your thumb is on the low strings, I guess these categories that they're really not that as useful for musicians as they are for people that are selling music or teaching about music, or and I say that because like all the guys that I knew as Piedmont players, even those that have passed away, have now become songsters. Yeah. And they didn't really change. It's just a different way of talking about it. But basically, the Piedmont style is defined by the guitar technique that's used of picking out a bass line and at the same time with your thumb, and at the same time picking out a melody or on the treble strings. Sounds like that.
Yeah. And I think I really do think Phil, that's so true. I mean, scholars like me, we want to classify things, but musicians don't care that much about classifying things.
I thought a lot about this. I mean, I guess to define things, you have to, focus on what makes them unique, what makes them different. For me, it's not my job to define anything, and so for me, it's more fun and more interesting to find the common ground between lots of different styles of music. I mean, I have thrown myself into situations now where I'm playing with like a woman fiddler that plays like Swedish folk music, and it's so different to me that I can't tell where the downbeat is. It's like, but then it's like, and she's talking about it's like right before you inhale. So when I take it down to something as essential as how I'm breathing, and then I can kind of connect and get a hold of it. And then, because I know it works because people dance to it, so there's a rhythm in there somewhere. So I just got to figure out where it is.
Right.
And so,
And the categorizations
historically, it made more sense historically, especially before, even in the post-war era. Chicago is very different than Louisiana and the West Coast and Texas. And in the last 20, 30 years, and especially anyone playing music today, the distinctions are less relevant. But historically, someone like Blind Boy Fuller was a lot different than someone like Garfield Akers or someone like Buddy Boy Hawkins.
Yeah, but it's been my experience that just about any good musician that you meet has got huge ears and loves all kinds of music.
That's right.
John Cephas played pop songs and torch songs and one of his favorite songs, "When I Grow Too Old to Dream." He loved to sing that song. Nat Reese, John Jackson, all these guys.
Robert Johnson.
Robert Johnson could play polkas.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they all could. I mean, Johnny Shines told me that he could play anything he heard on the radio.
Yeah, I remember him and Robert. There was Worth Long asked him and Robert in '91 at the Folk Life Festival. You might have heard one of those presentations, and they asked, what were some of the Robert Johnson songs he never recorded? And Shine said, that's like $1 million question. But he had to play Chinatown. I mean, some of the things that Robert Jr. played too, Basie and whatever. I mean,
and that kind of goes back to what I was talking about is the neighborhood. Whoever is in your neighborhood environment, you're gonna pick up on what they're doing, and somehow it gets incorporated into what you're doing. I mean, you're all influenced by your environment.
And the neighborhood today, in terms of music, though, is the internet. In one sense, so it's
worldwide.
Worldwide,
that's absolutely right.
So it's like
Well, in the 1930s when radio came into its own, artists from North Carolina were hearing artists from Texas and Mississippi, and styles began to blend and get borrowed, and that kind of stuff happened. I mean,
I've just been working on a chapter in a book about a Hawaiian band from Hopewell, Virginia. They're all white mill workers, and they heard radio 78s. They learned how to play Hawaiian music based on that. So it just stripped away those boundaries, those geographic boundaries, and pretty much everything was out there. So,
I got a real interesting story. I was on these shows in England with a guy from Mali named Ali Fakatouri. And he only spoke French, and I speak a little French. And so I was asking him, who he learned from in his, village. He says, Oh, no, John Lee Hooker. I got his whole thing from John Lee Hooker. Howling Wolf, when I was on this gig, my first gig with Howling Wolf was in L.A. in 1964. And for some reason, he just felt like opening up to me and talk, because he had not ever heard anybody like my age playing the stuff that he told me that his first inspiration to want to play was listening to Jimmy Rogers, the yodeling brakeman, He said that was his major influence. He said, I couldn't yodel to save my life. But, you gotta howl down.
I think we should get some of the younger members of our panel re-engaged here. Tell us a little bit how you, us old folks just go on and on. But tell us a little bit about where you see your music, the synthesis you're trying to create, and how does blues kind of fit into the styles of music that you're working on? Does any of you want to jump on that? Go ahead, Nate.
Well, I mean, like they were saying about the whole internet age and how we have access to anything we want to hear. Really, like I can go on the internet and listen to like French prog from the '60s if I want to, and then I can go listen to all of Prince's music if I want to, So the foundation of good guitar playing really is blues and being able to improvise and being able to say something, musically. So for me and what like I'm trying to do with music, it all goes back to like what this Piedmont blues is all about, which is combining all these beautiful things that people love in music and building a community and building a whole different kind of language in which people are connected in that language. And like that's just that's part of just being an American and just building, because just the whole melting pot concept. Right. And now we have access to like this entire, just all around the world, there's all this music and a lot of it is influenced by American music, since American music just moves so fast in different directions towards like electronic music, and then instrumental music right now is actually getting really interesting too, since we're evolving the blues into injecting like jazz, and then there's this huge punk movement of the 80s and all that stuff, and it's all kind of coming together into this huge genre. I have no idea what it's going to be, but there's going to be this huge new genre coming out. I just say this because I'm like in Nashville and all the stuff's coming together, since there are a lot of musicians from just all around the country are coming to Nashville, and we're just building this huge thing, and it's pretty wild. But yeah, that's what I'd say about it.
Great. I'd like to say something. First of all, I want to say congratulations and thank the Tyner Hill Heritage Festival for supporting the music, because I've been playing since the 60s, and I'm at a point now in my life where I'm confused even how to make a living playing the blues, you know what I mean? And this foundation and others like it that keep this open for musicians to have a place to perform. It's so much with the radio, and it's all about the big fish with that bring in the big dollars, that it's hard for a musician to be able to live and have health care, and what happens when you get too old to get around, and that's what's worrying me, because I've been playing my whole life and I don't know what to do. I'm at a point where I don't know where to go, because like I said, it's good that this foundation is here and there are others like it, because other words, I mean, the players today won't have a place to play or a way to even survive.
Let me follow up with that for you, Phil and you, John. You guys play all over the world, and from what I gather, there's a lot of venues overseas, but they're hardly, I mean, here in D.C., there's not a lot. I mean, for any kind of music, let alone the blues. So, and I realize that whole genre of the neighborhood joint is gone. How do you reignite that, or what's the next morph of that?
It's going to be communities that attract artists because it's cheap to live there, and communities develop around that eventually when they get something happening to get kicked out, and it becomes very expensive. But that seems to be the pattern of what it's always been. In terms of making a living, I mean, I've joined the union in in 1962 and paying my dues for all these years, and I get a big pension of $106 a month, you know? Give me a break, $106 a month after 51 years. That's insane. So it's not about fair, and it's not about, you know, what you're owed or due, you know, it's about what you make happen, I guess, and it's really nasty. It has been ever since I started playing. It's like really unfair business. But the rewards when you connect with audiences and you get things going, that can't be measured. That's what sustains you, you know. I mean, I'm really fortunate that I've, you know, been in the right place at the right time so many times.
I want to second what David said, and you know, very much commend Tinner Hill for not only putting on the festival, but these kinds of discussions as well, and they have a really deep respect for that tradition, the cultural tradition we're talking about. And I guess part of it too, in the larger picture, is how much do we as Americans value culture, right? You know, in our schools and all the, you know, if we don't do that, how we expect that people will grow up and want to create the kinds of communities that John is talking about, you know?
Yes. Well, I don't really know what to say. I think it's just a matter of, I mean, for me, I guess especially since John passed, I just say yes to everybody that calls me on the phone and says, do you want to collaborate? I mean, because I stay busy, and also I get to do a lot of different things, which I really enjoy, like getting stretched and yanked in this direction and that direction. And I don't know, like DC is a funny area to try to make a living. I mean, you know, there's no industry. I mean, DC has the government, which I think is kind of at the root of the fact that in DC there's not really that great of a sustained nightlife. You know, I mean, the clubs, you know, come and go pretty quickly. You know, there's not a lot of clubs that have like staying power. You know, although right now, I mean, you know, there's the Hamilton. There's a lot of kind of interesting stuff happening right now, and so I'm hopeful. But you know, I've been here. I was born in D.C., so I mean, it's kind of like being a Redskins fan. You know, it's like just when you think, yeah, they're gonna do something. So, but and also, I mean, I agree with what you were talking about you know, the people that count the money and figure out budgets and that kind of stuff. They consider the arts to be superfluous, and they're not. They're necessary. They're absolutely necessary. I mean, I'm a witness to that. I mean, doing art and having art in kids' lives, you know, saves lives and sustains lives, and it's necessary, and they need to the people that have the power to you know, decide budgets need to understand that.
Well, again, maybe some more younger members of our panel might want to address that. What do you think your generation, you know, how do you view the arts and culture, and where do you think it stands I mean, just in, say, the school that you've attended, you know, Lou, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Phil, everything you said today has really hit home with what is blues, and blues is telling a story. I think as a vocalist, it's really difficult to go through your set list and look at the songs you're putting together and say, well, is this blues? Because I know I've only been playing for 4 years, and I don't know all the old artists, and you need to do a lot more research there. But the songs that work are the songs that tell a story. Everything from Stormy Monday with the lyrics, they call it Stormy Monday, but Tuesday's just as bad. They call it Stormy Monday, and Tuesday's just as bad, to Honeyed Out, where your love's like too much sugar for me to for me to eat. Each song tells a different story, and if you understand the story, and then if you can somehow make the audience understand the story, then it makes it work. And for blues sustaining, I think that blues is a base that everyone should know, because it adds to every type of music. And there's a part in blues where you feel it, and it's like breathing. You know how to make it work. So I'm not sure how to sustain blues, but to Tinder Hill, thank you for bringing us out here, the younger ones, to meet everybody who's, you know, known blues and played a lot, and it's such an honor to be here with you guys. So, thank
Bill,
you.
that makes you old.
It's not news to me.
You know, like,
Go ahead, Chris.
well, I was just gonna piggyback on the whole idea of blues sustaining and in the music and arts in the schools. I mean, you know, I come out of DCPS and stuff, so the time when I was up in there, you know, we had music class and everything like that. I was and then, you know, they started taking all that stuff out. I was privileged to go to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and so I was in the school that you know, pushed the arts and everything. But now they take everything out and they work towards like standardized testing, just like really industrial revolution like style education and, you know, assembly line. And because of that, school isn't that much of a pleasure, you know. And but the arts is the thing that keeps you alive, and it, you know, it can help you before you jump back into that math class. You know what I'm saying? It likes a little break. And so I think that needs to be kept alive. And as far as like blues, sustaining itself, it could be through schools and through like this mentorship. I feel like everything is cyclical, and like some cats that have been playing like way longer than I've been like playing music, period. You know, it's like we need that wisdom and stuff, and so this could happen through collaborations as we've been doing and stuff like that. I learned so much, and then me and Rick can make money together, you know. So that's a different shit of sustaining right there. Because we do gigs together, we're mixing together hip hop and blues and stuff, and so I think the whole idea of being like in that position to give wisdom to other cats that they're not hip about it, that is a place to monetize. You know what I'm saying? By conducting workshops and putting together some school program. It takes like a little bit of legwork to find out like the national education standards and kind of link up a little to their little school curriculum and stuff. But I think that's the joint in teaching, like what you have acquired through all these years, what we don't have. And I think that's how that could work right there.
I think it's a good point that I think it's cyclical too, and I sort of have some predictions, but you know, you can't force kids to like something. They have to like it on their own, which is they heard it on the radio, they heard their friends talking about it. And I think what's happening, you know, what you said, when recordings were invented, geographic barriers were broken down, and now with the internet, that's even to a greater extent. So, I think that I see like some of the popular artists. So I always use like Adele as an example of this. If you listen to Adele, I sort of hear that as a very retro. Yeah. I mean, you hear a lot of, you know, it could have been in the style of Ray Charles, and so what you hear is in the midst of all this really electronic, you know, pop music that people are listening to, all of a sudden this thing this acoustic instrument, it was just a band playing, and young people like that. So I think it's possible. And maybe there's the split happening where there is a lot more electronic music, but at the same time, more people are hearing. It's really nice to hear a natural voice that's not affected by a computer.
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear natural instruments, and so, you know, hopefully, more young people are going to be hearing acoustic instruments. I mean, I hope they still know what an acoustic piano sounds like, acoustic guitar. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times they don't know what a natural voice sounds like without auto-tune.
Yeah, I think we talk in most of our stories. We heard there was some entry point, whether it was Cream covering Robert Johnson, or that people said, "Oh wow, who's this guy?" And they sort of went back into that. My son, I remember when he first played the White Stripes for me, and I said, "Oh, you want to hear where that came from?" And all of a sudden, all the weird, scratchy records I listened to became a little cooler in his mind. So I think that does definitely happen. And again, you guys have access to stuff that, you know.
Yeah, cats just need their dots to get connected.
That's
you know?
right.
And hip hop will give you a prime example of that because we're using other people's recordings to create music. I mean, I dabble in most of the acoustic instrumentation, than sampling. But traditionally, because we're using other people's recordings, like a really famous hip hop band called Tribe Called Quest, they did their whole sound was based on using like break beats, like hard drum beats that came from records like James Brown, and then they would use jazz samples, like a one song like sample like Red Clay, or you sample like Duke Ellington beats, and like you listen to it and you like, oh, this sounds hot. You look at the liner notes and you like, oh, and then you listen to the original. You hear that one chord progression that got looped, and then you see him go into the B section. Then you hear the solo, and you like, oh, I'm hip. Now I'm listening to crazy jazz repertoire on the strength of someone sampling this to do hip hop. You know what I'm saying? So it just like catches need their dots to get connected one way or another, whether it's through like direct collaboration or through people being like, oh, well, you know, like the White Stripes, and this is the tradition that they're building upon. You know, they might.
There's a Grammy Award-winning hip hop record that sampled Junior Wells' Voodoo Man Blues album. I think Green Shipment Company. I remember when they played it at the Grammy. When I was still watching Grammys on TV, I was really that's interesting.
Yeah.
But
who was
I'm
the
not
artist?
sure which one it was. The Roots or something.
The Roots?
That was like.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you listen to hip hop 9 times out of 10, like, you know what I'm saying, the stuff is sample, and then it's through this one you could kind of like get the genealogy of music thing happening. You know what I'm saying? You kind of start traveling, you kind of backpedal, and then discover music like that one. Yeah.
Actually, in like most of my, even as a guitar player, most of my high school, I was listening to hip hop actually, because like the way that hip hop uses all this old music and splices it up and injects it in, you know, I always loved that. And the thing I love about this era is that like I have friends in like Houston and Florida. I can send them music, they can send me music. We can just put tracks on it, tracks on tracks, and then just release it. Because we don't have to even be together anymore. Because they can send me something, they can tell you what they want on it. I'll have producers like send me a beat they've made. And like producers, like even in hip hop, they still use they use
live instrumentation. Yeah, especially if you play a bass. The bass just makes electronic recording come alive. You know.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's kind of like an upside of this whole technology that I hadn't thought about. Yeah. Because to me, I mean, it's I think of it as kind of negative in a way because it seems like kids. Like I remember I was reading that book, Langston Hughes' book, and he talking about his travels, and he went to Cuba, and he had all he had was like a small duffel bag of clothes, and he had a little portable record player, and whenever he felt like listening to music, it was an instant party because everybody else heard the music too. And nowadays, I mean, young people seem to listen in isolation a lot. And so I think it, in a lot of ways, like that it doesn't help build community because everybody's kind of in their own world. But it's nice to hear that the technology can also be used to reach out.
Yeah, I'd say the community. I'd say that there's still a community, but it's really really different. Like it's like even like I collaborated with Christylez like first time I was like must have been like 10 or something.
Yo,
like,
for
I
real?
was really young, like in downtown Silver Spring. I don't even know how old I was. It was a long time ago. But like, I mean, I've had the chance to collaborate with lots of people, and like even if I don't like, I haven't really kept up with them, you know, that much. But just even in the now, it's more like single experience.
And then like I'm like constantly connected to him via Facebook. I'm like, oh, what are you up to? Okay, I see him. Like like that's real cool. You know, like we're connected. You know what I'm saying? We might not like be on the horn every day and stuff like that, but you know we're still connected. And when we get up, we're cool. And if I want to reach out to him to do some stuff, boom, boom, boom. And that whole idea of not having the geographical boundaries to record and collaborate is cool stuff. I mean, there are pros and cons to everything, you know what I'm saying? And this lack of community is one of them because the listening experience and enjoying music is just you by yourself in your room sitting in front of a screen that's kind of like hurting your eyes in the long run.
Well, it's either isolated listening by yourself or, I mean, I think the other thing is young people are looking at music as it's a multitasking thing. So it's very rare for somebody to sit down and listen to a recording and that be the only input that they're getting. Like, you know, in the past, if you went out and you bought a record that you were really excited about, you had to look for it, and you finally found, you go home, and you're not going to, you know, sit in front of the computer or the TV at the same time. You're going to listen to the record.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's pros and cons to it because it's very convenient and you can listen to a lot more variety of things. But I think there's not as much really focusing on that.
Although I will throw a little not counterfactual, but spin on that. I mean, the same was true of somebody going to a juke joint, right? They weren't there necessarily just to hear Robert Johnson. They were there to dance. They were there to drink. They were there to talk to their friends. So that was their soundtrack. But they weren't necessarily totally focused on.
But at least it was live.
Well, it was live. That's true. It was a physical community, and I wonder how some of the other. Yeah, go ahead, Eleanor.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know how this fits in, but I think that people who have done music in front of all kinds of situations, I think you can tell that they have.
Yes.
If you haven't done that and all you've done is record it and then it goes out and then you go, it's different because you have to learn to sing to the coffee machine if you've got to.
Yeah.
You know, if people are there with their dates and they're talking to each other and it's a little place and you're in the corner there, you know, you have to learn how to get people's attention.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to learn how to deal with real people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think you can tell the difference in performers who have and haven't.
And reading the people you're playing with.
Yeah.
And as Phil said earlier, with Flora, knowing just physically knowing where she was going to go. Yeah.
I'd say that like even for me, like that's my foundation because, you know, I started off playing in clubs, playing in churches, you know, playing with a bunch of people I didn't know were much older than me. You know, I had to follow them and like playing in like doing competitions like at the Apollo and stuff like that. But, you know, past like right now, you know, I'm in a new area. You know, I don't know a lot of people, so really like I think it's a really easy way to get to know people musically by just like sending them something, they send you something, and that's and through doing that I've been able to like call people and be like, hey, I'm doing a studio session today, do you want to come over, and we'll just improvise an entire studio session, you know. So I think it's a lot easier to know other artists in this era because I can just be like, hey, send me some of your stuff, and then I can write a song based out of what you do, and then I'll be like, hey, I wrote this song, I think you sound good on it, you know.
How do you find these people? Do you know them first, or?
Well, it's through like we can kind of tell just by like looking at each other, you know. Sometimes you'll see somebody, you'll just be like,
okay.
Yeah, you just be like, okay, like
metadata, you know, you just Google keywords, you know what I'm saying? Like funky guitar, spoons. You know
I thought people come up to me like, oh, I Googled you, like, you want to do something? I'm like, yeah, sure. You know, I don't know what they play, but I'm like, okay, yeah. You know,
but finding people online, you know, it could be as simple as a keyword or something. If there's like a certain institution, like let's say SoundCloud, where you could share like waveform audio and stuff, and people could comment on the timeline of the waveform and stuff, it's really interesting. I've actually like worked on an album using that and have like people like send mixing and mastering notes on it, like, oh, lower this right here, we're going to change that take on it. But what you can do is you can type in like certain keywords and stuff, and maybe you can find other cats like that. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, cool. So I would be curious, you who I can't ever remember your name. I've heard his music a lot on Tacoma Park cable access, but the rest of you, I don't know what you sound like, and I would love to hear. And so what's the best way to do that? If I give you my email, can you send me some just examples of what you do, or because I'm really curious to hear. And and to add to that, I'm just really happy that these young folks are here. I accused him of being on the wrong side of the table, but I was wrong about that. but you know, I'm really glad that y'all are here. This is the first one of these things that I've been to where young people have been invited, and I get a lot of energy from hanging out with young folks and hearing what they're doing and hearing the new angles and twists. and stuff. So I'm really glad that y'all are here, and I'm really curious about your music. So
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's really a great mix, and I think, we need to think about what the future of this music is, and you guys are the future of it. I'm in the same boat with Phil. I'd love to hear what you're doing, and I think we had a question here.
The question is, you guys have been talking about performance and not how much money you can make, but a lot of technical stuff. But how many of you actually jam? I'm talking about face-to-face with a couple guys and not working on a particular song, but jam.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I mean, and then you let him take it, and you.
I don't want to.
But again, not for performance. I'm just talking about for the love of music.
Well, I think every Friday for the past 3 years at least, then my dad has gotten together with a bunch of musicians he knows, and so we'll just jam, every Friday night. And then, as I got in high school, as I, got to know more and more, other kids who also played music, then we just come over. I have a whole setup in my basement. I just invite everybody over and we jam, and that was like, we wouldn't have particular songs. Somebody would just come up with an idea, and then we just kind of build on that and just see where it went. And if we liked it, we would record it, and sometimes it sucked, and actually a lot of times it did suck.
That's a whole lot of music. I mean, I can think back to my grandpa's drumming. He played mandolin, that's a long time ago, in the late 50s to 60s. Anybody who had a guitar would get together, and I'm not a musician, but it was a big folk singing stuff, and so you'd sit around either in your living room or outside, and we did a lot of things. You say if we bought a record, well, that was it, you listened to it, but that's really not the way it was in the early 60s. You bought something you liked and you let it play over and over again. You might be talking on the phone, you might be doing homework, you might be in front of the mirror practicing a dance move that you hope that you'd get a chance, you'd be asked out if you could use it. But there again, that was a lot of, I keep going back to when people just got together and played music. And I just wondered if you all, because it bothers me that not enough people do that.
Well, I mean, like for me, especially this year, I've had several bands in which we just we'll get together, we'll get in a circle, and we'll set up the amps in a circle, and we'll just look at each other, and we'll just be like, all right, play, and we'll just just do that. And even at times when we've just gone outside, and there's on the quad, and just set up. It just played for 4 hours.
Then it's still there, because in hearing you talk, I was getting the impression it was more about becoming maybe not famous, but earning a good living and getting on YouTube and all that, instead of, hey, this is really cool, my friends and I, we may stink, but we get together and we play, and anybody who's on the quad that wants to come over can. Okay.
I don't expect to make money. I expect to be homeless at some point.
Got the right.
I really don't.
Obviously, being able to make a living off of music that would be really nice. Yeah. But I think ultimately, why I do it is to be able to make that connection with, other musicians or, with the performances with the crowd. And I have to say one of my favorite things when I jam with people is being able to just look at each other and almost instinctively know where the song is going next. And it's not like we discussed it beforehand or anything. We just know exactly what's going to happen, and then we take it there, and it sounds beautiful.
I'm glad to hear it.
I've never met a musician that got into it because they thought they would make a lot.
I know some who have. I know some who are really trying to make money, and I'm just stop. I'm stop it. And I mean, it's great being with these guys up here because they've been on this brainwave for a really long time. So I really love hearing from you guys because you've had all this experience and traveling all over the place and playing with all these.
But you're alive.
Right, it's growing up in this area and everyone's always talking about money. I'll work in I've had experience working in law firms and stuff, and people tell me I need to make money. I've got to I'll show people on music you need to put a bridge on this. You got to make more commercial, and I'm just I don't care. I mean I think that's one thing about growing up in the DC area that you really get is people telling you that you have to make money, and And that's one of the things that I heard a lot growing up, and I was just like, no. So I really have a really good mindset towards music and that. Like, since like people kept telling me I need to make money, and I was just like, stop. So it's really easy for me to not listen to people from growing up in this area.
Yeah, I mean, DC, man, like the classic situation that you get from your elders is like, yo, get your education, go to school, get that degree, so you get that good government job. It's always about that good government job, not government job. Government job. Like that's the thing in the DC area, So everything is kind of like wrapped around that. But then on the flip side, we have like musical institutions like Go-Go, where people could clock some like good loot in that one, and it's all music, and that whole style is based upon jamming right there. Yeah. Like, I mean, the show will happen like for 4 hours long. As soon as the beat starts, it happens, and then the beat stops when like the law enforcement come to check it. Right?
we just said that about
it's just like, oh, the party's over now, right?
Yeah.
So
and that's 4 in the morning.
Yo, and that's just constant music. So that's all jamming. Like you can't score something that long. You know what I'm saying? Like it's all improvised in jamming. So we have our flip sides here in DC. It's a pretty interesting city. I feel like to grow up in and also to do music in.
And I think going back to jamming, you don't necessarily need an instrument to jam. My friends and I are like, I'm an acapella, so when we go on road trips, something comes up on the radio, and then one girl adds the beatbox and the other girl adds the bass line, and then there's harmony going, and soon you got 4-part harmony. So there's jamming. There's still jamming there. And I think what's beautiful and brilliant about music is when you're playing and suddenly it clicks, and you can step outside the music. Wow, I am part of this, and for some reason, it works.
So we just have a few minutes left, and then I've got to run over and play music with Cheryl. Okay, I'll give you a hypothetical. That's always fun, right? Where do you think blues will be in this area? Or as we said, all the boundaries are being broken, the geography anyways, in say 25 years. What's the future going to look like? Well, you have no crystal ball. Come on, go ahead, Rick.
I think that as long as people recognize the acoustic instruments, or the basic electric guitars, or the basic instruments themselves, where you actually play it and the instrument as opposed to compose on a keyboard. And I'm talking about like the keyboard on your computer.
Yeah.
And cut and paste and Pro Tools. That if people maintain that focus on the actual instruments or the rhythm sections, the actual instruments that are involved, that it's going to stick around. It's going to be, there's going to be a melding point, but people are going to do like they do with the hip hop, where they hear a sample and they're going to go back and they go, oh, where did that come from? And they're going to research it, and then they're going to keep on incorporating these elements.
And I want to say too, the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities, their Folk Life program, has a program that's called a Master Apprentice program. And I know John Cephas did it.
Yeah, Maryland has it too. Most states have it. I've done it in Maryland.
So these are great programs where master artists do pass on their knowledge to younger people, and so those are really important things to keep that music alive, as Rick is saying. Yeah. Go ahead, Eleanor.
Yeah, I guess I have to mention the Archie thing. Since we were talking about jamming and passing things on and everything. Archie Edwards was a musician, passed away, was a barber. We kept his barbershop open, and then we had to move, but we still have jams on Saturday afternoons, acoustic. Only one person has ever been allowed to bring an electric guitar there, and that was Mr. O'Neill, who was a friend of Archie's, and he had a really great guitar. And actually, the strings on it, he was really proud of the fact that he never had to change a string. Until Warner Williams got a hold of it and broke the string. So then he had to put a new string on there. But anyway, it's acoustic blues jam, and it's on Saturday afternoons usually, and the web address is acousticblues.com. So if anybody feels like coming by and seeing what it's there, you never know. But
let's not forget some of the folks from the barbershop will be at
oh, that's right, tomorrow, yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's great. Well, it's really exciting to see all you young people who are bringing things forward and mixing it up, and great to also have some veterans who have seen a lot and know the history of the music. And just want to thank you all for being here today and putting up with all my crazy questions. So let's give everybody a big hand.